homer, led the league in tackles with 85. For Darius Prince, and Philadelphia's on the board first.
On the draw, this is Bryson Allen. And Allen weaving his way all the way down to the 22. 10-yard line, 5. Mayfield, Dancy, all around. Throw it as far as he can throw it. Jump ball coming. Crazy stuff. Not this time.
And you want to be a wide receiver, you're going to have to take a little bit of a hit like that as Brown got him in that shoulder, but watch. Those are teeth.
Do we have a dentist on staff here?
We're back with another episode of Around the Indoor Football World, and there's plenty to talk about this week, considering the fact that we just got an announcement yesterday that the NAL is adding another team. And that's not all. We had a very exciting NAL championship game that we're going to discuss. We've got some very interesting moves in the IFL we'll get to a little bit later with Cody Bryant from in the alley. I apologize. But first, I got to introduce my great co-host. You guys know him. You love him. He likes to create some controversy here and there. But my guy Krish. Krish, how you doing this morning? You did, buddy.
I'm doing great. Excited to get this started.
Absolutely. So, let's just go ahead and jump right into this. You and I have been talking about this for a while behind the scenes. Excuse my reach. We knew there was a good chance that Wheeling was going to be joining the NAL. And yesterday we finally got the announcement that they are in fact joining the NAL. So obviously we've kind of talked about this a little bit before on this show. If you guys pay attention, you will have definitely caught that before. But let's go ahead and give our reactions to this now that it's official. What are your thoughts right off the top of your head? Knowing that the team that the NAL just added not only gives them a little bit more of an East Coast presence, it also brings in a very established franchise that looked very professional from the outside looking in.
I think this is the start of a movement for the league, right? We talked, like you mentioned, we talked about it on the Cobra show. Coach Grown talked about expansion. This league needed to expand to survive. And they knew that, and I think bringing in Wheeling is a huge step in the right direction. And I think there's others that are gonna follow. I saw a comment from Corpus Christi ownership on Facebook today, basically teasing the fact that they're next to join. Beaumont mentioned in an article that they're joining. So there's so many teams out there that once one domino falls, another domino falls, and now Wheeling. I heard from a source that Wheeling was in talks with the AIF, right? And they were set on the AIF, from what I saw on Facebook comments and different things. And so maybe that makes the AIF feel like maybe we can do something with the NAL now that we couldn't get Wheeling. So it opens up the door for so many possibilities, and I think it's a great move for the league.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that. There's been speculation this offseason, and I've definitely been one of the people who has been speculating that, it makes sense for us to see an AIF NAL merger, for lack of a better term, or, maybe it's collaboration. Maybe they keep their identities, but they continue to play against each other, where you have interconference games and stuff like that. And it's a situation where I think that it just makes sense for both the leagues, or at least for a lot of the teams inside of these leagues. So I'm very curious to see what happens this offseason. But I expect a very chaotic year once again, with a lot of teams bouncing back and forth between leagues. It wouldn't shock me entirely if, the NAL goes all the way as high as, let's say 12 teams this season, maybe even 14 at points in time. It just depends on how everything shakes out and how some teams decide to proceed with their futures, because they're most likely going to change leagues as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you hit it right on the nail, and I think it's hard, right, with the AFL and kind of the way it shook out. But I look at a team like Rapid City. Does Rapid City maybe join, or do teams that maybe didn't work out in the AFL think, okay, this is the more regional opportunity for me? Rapid City used to be in the CIF. Does Topeka come back? Does Oklahoma come back? Is there a franchise? Before the 2020 COVID, um, Ricky Burst announced the franchise in Allen, Texas, right? Because of COVID, it never happened. So maybe this is the year to bring that franchise back. So I think the NAL, they really stepped up to the plate more than I thought they would, to be honest. And I'm so happy for the league. And I think the league is going to have such a bright future after this offseason.
I tend to agree. I mean, obviously, we've seen promises of great seasons for the NAL in the past, and they haven't come to fruition. But I would caution that this is the first full off season that the Omaha Beef and the Sioux City Bandits have been involved in the NAL. I expect a little bit different feel for the league going forward. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and pose a question to whoever's in watching. If you could relaunch any team, whether it's Topeka, Oklahoma, or the franchise that Chris just mentioned, or just any team in general, from indoor football history, which would it be? Which team would you like to see come back with the NAL, knowing what we know right now? I'm not saying projections or anything like that, but knowing that they just added Wheeling, knowing that they currently have 6 teams, how would you proceed if you were the NAL? Chris, right off the top of your head, are there any other franchises you could see jumping over from, say, the AAL2?
One franchise that sticks out to me, the Dallas Falcons. Obviously, I know Tyrone had big plans for the team, but I think as a whole, like I don't think he has the money yet to move it. So if he can get another owner, another more resources, he could 100% make that happen. Tyrone has the knowledge in order to run a professional team. I have no doubt about it. But maybe the Jersey Bearcats. Jersey Bearcats have been around a long time, and I think they've been around 11 years. I think in the AL2. So, them being an experienced franchise, that could be an option. In the AIF, Columbus, another team. I mean, obviously, I feel like the writing is almost on the wall that Columbus is going to join the NAL. I could be wrong, but and then you look at, I mean, I don't think any teams in the IFL are going to leave to go to the NAL. So those are really it, honestly.
That's fair. So once again, if you're just joining us, this is the big news of the day, or at least for today. The Wheeling Milelanders have announced that they will be moving over to the NAL after an undefeated season in the AAL2. And ultimately, I think that's a lot due to Joshua Resignaldo's influences in his past, being in the NAL for many years. So I think this was kind of a foregone conclusion for people. At least for some people, they kind of knew what was going on because it made sense. But, like Chris said, they very, very sternly considered the AIF. And it was a situation where, ultimately, I think a lot of teams in the AIF are going to end up in the NAL. And maybe I'm wrong on this one. And maybe it doesn't come to fruition the way I think it will. But like I said before, I think it just makes sense for both leagues. And I kind of posed this question on Facebook, and I'll go ahead and pull that up here in a minute. But first, I wanted to get to another post, and I wanted to get your opinions on this one, because I ultimately think this is an interesting topic to discuss here, and that is that post from Dodge City Law Football on Facebook. For those of you who didn't catch it, Dodge City Law is obviously a former indoor football team. As you can see in the little picture here, they've got a for sale sign up. They've been trying to sell the team for many years, but every once in a while they put up a post, and it's typically dropping a little bit of knowledge, criticizing another team, another league, something of the sort. It's always interesting for sure. That's why I follow him. But this last post dropped some interesting information, posed some questions, and ultimately, I think, really made me think about some things that I would not otherwise have thought about if not for this post. Give me just a moment. Sorry about that. But we're going to go ahead and read the post verbatim. So this is, again, from Dodge City Law Football on Facebook. If you want to follow him, I firmly encourage that you do. You will definitely catch interesting things like these from time to time. But it says, I told everyone months ago to be patient because the National Arena League has a very good long-term plan with very capable leadership, and they were going to have a tremendous offseason, both in terms of growth and in terms of ridding themselves of several lingering issues. Without getting into too much detail, the reality is the league had to take some risks last year in order to save the league, which was failing under the leadership of the former commissioner and executive director. When they're talking about these risks, they're talking about bringing in a team like North Texas Bulls, bringing over a team like Topeka, some teams that had some questions about ownership groups, but they went ahead and brought them in anyway. Several of these risks ended up not working out. The Topekos, the North Texas Bulls, and the skeptics' competing interests couldn't point these misses out fast enough. So I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of critics that have pointed out a lot of things about the NAL, and with good reason, a past couple years as they've lost franchises pretty frequently. But like this says, the reality is, however, the NIL mishaps ended up being a drop in the bucket from an overall industry perspective, and suddenly now, starting tomorrow, hinting at this announcement that we now know, those skeptics and agenda players are going to start seeing the NIL's long-term vision start to play out. Remember now, I said this many times in the past months, before it all played out right exactly how I said it would from the beginning, the entire Arena Football League was a house of cards built on lies and only believed by owners who were painted into their own corners in one way or another. Interesting comment there. This entire AFL debacle never even gets off the ground without that group of former CIF teams all jumping on board. You could definitely argue that. There is absolutely no debate about that now. But the truth behind that entire situation is those two Kansas franchises, the Storm and the Liberty, should have stopped listening to an egomaniac with very little history in this business. They should have stopped acting out of emotion and accepted the invitation that was extended to them to re-engage in conversations with the Omaha Beef and Sioux City Bandits. Had they done that, I am highly confident they would have worked through their issues, and the byproduct of that would have been the Topeka Tropics franchise, which would have been saved. The new Wichita franchise would have come along by default, which also would have opened the door for the Desert Hawks and the Orlando Predators to remain in the NAL, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to stop right there and discuss this part real quick before we move on. Krish, any points so far in this first half that really stick out to you that you're just like, I had not considered that. That makes some sense to me.
I never considered that there was a potential Orlando would have stayed in the NAL. I always had that feeling, the way their ownership would talk on the show, it would be always criticizing the NAL. They were unhappy in the NAL. They said it behind the scenes as well. I think the Wichita franchise would have definitely came over to the NAL. I think the Wichita franchise, quite honestly, I would not be surprised if they come over to the NAL next year. Considering that if you look at the net system that they have in Wichita, they only have nets on one side. The other side of their building doesn't allow for nets, right, because of the way the wall is structured. So maybe that will, that could be good without rebound nets, but we'll have to see. I think the CIF franchises have kind of stepped up a lot. Billings. I think Billings has stepped up. I think Rapid City stepped up when they were in it. But I think Nashville That's one of the franchises. That's not a CIF franchise, right? That's a old AFL franchise coming back. They're the ones who really kind of started the movement per se. Nashville, obviously Orlando. There's so much here to kind of break down and comprehend. With Southwest Kansas and Salina, I think what those two franchises have going on in the AFL is something special, to be honest. I mean, you look at what Southwest Kansas has built in terms of talent. Same thing with Salina. I think it's hard. It's really hard to say what if. I think we have to look in the future and see, what's best for those two franchises. If one team will come over, I think it'll be Salina, in my opinion.
Salina would make some sense. I definitely think that some of the franchises in the AFL considering a move over the NAL definitely makes sense. But I wanted to look at some of the teams that were not mentioned in this list that I found interesting. They talk about, the Orlando Predators. They talk about the Desert Hawks. They talk about the Storm. They talk about the Liberty. Where's the Rapid City Marshals? Where's the Billings Outlaws? Why were these teams not mentioned? Why was the Iowa Rampage not mentioned that was owned by Trevor Burdett, who was a CIF owner at one point? Just seemed interesting to me. Like, why were these teams left out of the I don't want to call it a rant because it's not really a rant. A lot of this is fact. It is truly fact that a lot of this could have happened. So if that's the case, like, why leave those teams out? Were they not included? Was it not on the table for those teams to join? Was Rapid City never going to end up being an NAL team? Was Billings never going to end up being an NAL team? What was the option if they didn't end up in the AFL, if they weren't going to be an NAL team? That part right there opened up a lot of questions for me because it was really like, okay. There's definitely a reason why those teams weren't mentioned. And I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but that seemed to pique my curiosity. What do you think about that?
Yeah, with Billings, I wonder if there's some behind the scenes with, Stephen Titus and maybe the CIF, CIF board or CIF leadership at the time. It's kind of hard to know. With Rapid City, that was surprising. I've always associated Rapid City with the CIF. And whatever the CIF does, Rapid City is going to do. And now, obviously, Rapid City know more. But, yeah, that really did pique my interest as well.
All right, we're going to go ahead and run through the back half of this now. Despite what people will say now, that entire scenario is much closer to reality than people believe. But the conversation that really needed to happen never did. So, we could say a lot of scenarios are, capable of happening without that conversation happening, but that's neither here nor there. So the CIF split that should never have happened eventually did happen, and the remaining CIF teams found themselves in the middle of quite possibly the worst disaster in the history of arena indoor football. So the real question is, now what? Well, the first domino will fall tomorrow, that being Wheeling. Then very soon, several more teams will leave, one failing league. You could read into this as that being the AIF. And lost my place. Sorry about that. Leave one failing league and join the suddenly much strengthened NAL. From there, well, that is where the story really gets interesting. But in my opinion, unless the Arena League has a pot full of money, sorry about that. Southwest Kansas and Salina need to do what they should have done last year. Enter into respectful, humble, and business-focused discussions with other long-term successful franchises in their region, i.e. Omaha and Sioux City, with the intention of reuniting and building a much stronger and financially viable league, which in turn will not only benefit their franchises, but the entire industry over the long term. Man, like I said, a lot to unpack in this statement. Always is every time Dodge City Law decides to chime in on, with their thoughts. And this is one of those situations where they decided to speak up. This was not the topic that I expected to come up. I didn't expect AFL teams to be the talks of, relocation once again. But when you really think about it and the way the AFL has gone, with everything unfolding the way it has, the removal of the $1,000 minimum that we know about now that has, kind of worked its way through the league. And we know some teams are paying much less than that. Some teams are paying closer to it. Some teams are paying way over it. All of a sudden, there's been a little bit of a talent gap that's kind of developed across the league due to that. And kudos to the teams that have been able to compete despite the fact that they can't pay what some other teams have. But, it's an interesting scenario to watch play out real time. And it's one of those scenarios that I think is going to be it's going to be really interesting to watch this offseason, because I think we're going to see at least probably another conservatively. Wow, I stumbled over that hard. Probably about 8 to 10 teams relocating leagues. And, we could even see a good chunk hit the IFL as well. It wouldn't surprise me at all if we saw the reduction of a couple leagues, not just potentially the AIF that was hinted at in this past post, but, potentially the AFL as well. It could be a scenario where we see only the IFL and the NAL survive. And if that's the case, so be it. But I do want to say that that's not necessarily a bad thing. We've talked a lot about the leagues cannibalizing each other and the fans and kind of splitting the interests of arena football fans. If we reduced to only 2 leagues, maybe that's a scenario where the fans, the casual fans, are suddenly a lot more interested. You have larger leagues. You have 2 of them. It's a much more clear cut what's going on with the indoor football world. And maybe you go back to a little bit closer to arena rules in the National Arena League to even give yourself a little bit more of a step apart from the IFL. But ultimately, I could see a scenario where the AFL breaks up and ultimately goes their separate ways into the IFL and the NAL, and then the NAL ultimately, for lack of a better term, balloons up to 12 to 14 teams this offseason. Chris, any final thoughts on this before we move on to the IFL?
Yeah, you hit it right on the nail. It's going to be a crazy offseason. I think there's so much to look forward to, so much almost cleaning up, past sins per se, like, Dawg City Law said on the Facebook post. I think this is a big offseason. Honestly, we thought last offseason was big. This is like 10 times bigger, in my opinion. I'm really excited to see what happens. I'm excited to see how many teams try to apply to the IFL and get denied. There might be solid teams out there that might try to join the IFL, but the IFL is really, really strict in what they want. Todd Tyron, he doesn't let anyone in. So I think there's only certain teams that I look at right now that meet those standards. Meet those standards in terms of like presentation and everything what the IFL wants. And and financially, I think if you look at the AFL right now, so what teams meet that standard for the IFL? Billings, Nashville, Orlando, Albany, Washington, I would say for sure. Wichita, no. I can't say Wichita. Southwest Kansas, yes. Salina, yes. So, there are teams out of the 8 teams remaining that do meet those standards to go to the IFL in terms of what they're looking for in viable franchises. So I still believe in the AFL, though. I really think the AFL is going to survive next year. Unless the new leadership line, they seem really set on making it work long term. And it starts with the TV deal, right? If they have a TV deal, they said they're gonna have a TV deal for the playoffs and the championship. So if they have any sort of TV deal, whether that's with NFL Network or a smaller channel, I'm interested to see where that goes to.
Definitely some big questions left to answer on this season, and we still have 2 leagues that have already finished up, so it's going to be a very interesting offseason indeed. But we're going to go ahead and transition over to IFL. But first, a quick word from one of our sponsors, S Time for Fitness. Good morning, Cody. How are you doing this morning?
That was an eventful drive from Kansas City up here into the Quad Cities. So bright and early. Kid woke me up before the alarm. So what can you do?
Hey, they're good for that. That's for sure. So you're up in Quad City. Are you going to the game?
Yeah, this is actually the first game, like the first indoor football league game I've been to since 2015. When the Nebraska Danger were still around, I had an internship up in Grand Island. So I went to a couple of games when they were up there. They played, I think, like Colorado Ice, Tri-City Fevers, I think Sioux Falls Storm and stuff like that around that time too. So it's nice to actually get back and actually watch a game since there's really nothing in that Kansas City area for the time being.
Hey, there's the goats. Are you watching the TAL at all?
Unfortunately not. I've caught a couple of games on YouTube. It just has not necessarily piqued my interest. Now, granted, six-man football, trying to learn the rules on the fly, it just seems like everyone goes out open for a pass. Just not something that I'm used to. I have watched a couple of games, but that arena that the goats play in, they need to fix the lighting.
A little bit. That's for sure. But definitely, I just throwing that out there. I know you're more of an IFL fan, which is why you're here to talk some IFL. So, as of late, we're going to start off with some transaction news because I know there's been a couple interesting transactions, and we'll probably circle back to talk about the NAL championship at the end. I didn't want to leave Cody waiting for too long here, but a couple interesting transactions that stuck out to me were a couple of Liga de Football Americano. I hope I got that right, everybody. Players jumping back into the IFL. You know, we've got quarterback Kenyatta Allen, who's jumping back in with Tucson. And then we got Joshua Mack, a running back that joined Jacksonville. So when you look at Jacksonville and what they've done recently, you know, they've cycled in Kevin Didio Weber from the NAL, who was the NAL's Special Teams Player of the Year. He's now their kicker. They've gained Joshua Mack. They've brought back Connor Blount. Connor Blount. Are you encouraged by what Jacksonville has done? Do you think that's going to be enough for a late season playoff push, or are they just trying to get some momentum here at the end of the year before they're going into 2025?
Excuse me. To be brutally honest with you, I think their season is done. However, the momentum shift into 2025, there's just something, and I've said it on my channel, not to plug or anything, but like there's just something about Jacksonville that they just refuse to score 40 points. I don't know what it is. Like they always get stuck between like 35 and 38 points. So trying to revamp that offense, whether it's getting Connor Blount back, I think Fred Payton's been fine, but there's just not really been any dynamic receiver since they got rid of Tamarian Terry. They got rid of Cam Solomon. Yeah, Jeremiah Payton's filled in fine. They've brought in Jaden Stoshak and stuff like that, but it's like that offense just cannot get going. Defensively, they look all right. They've shifted a lot on that defensive secondary, but at the same time, yeah, it's just kind of been stuck in the mud for Jacksonville. Like they've brought in Mack because Boom Williams is on season injured reserve. I thought I saw on the transactions page that Connor Blunt's actually on season reserve. So I'm not sure.
You're right. My mistake.
Oh, you're good. You're good. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems like Jacksonville's just kind of stuck in the mud. And I know that their fan base isn't, I wouldn't say happy about it because they're so used to winning, but there's just something about that where I just think they're completely done. They're the second worst or third worst team compared to conference win percentage. I think they're just looking forward to 2025. Now, can they play spoiler? That's another question. But yeah, that's it for Jacksonville for me at least.
That's fair enough. And this could be a situation where they're just trying to build some momentum for 2025. And, I can't fault them for trying to figure out a combination that works. Obviously, they're new to the IFL. It's a new rule set to them. So, you can't necessarily take these games for granted, even though the season is quote unquote lost. Use it for a learning experience. Get to the point where you feel more comfortable with the rules set. You feel more comfortable with the roster you have going into next season. And, for lack of a better terms, now you're self-scouting going into 2025 and you have a better situation for your team on your hands. Krish, anyone who sticks out to you that Jacksonville brought in? I know you're probably going to say Kevin Didio Weber, obviously, but who else?
They had a receiver early in the season. I want to know what happened to him. Marquise McLean, he was from Auburn. He was really dynamic when he played us. They also brought back Harrison Poole. Harrison Poole was a big piece for them early in the offseason. Or early in the season, they gave up on Harrison Poole way too quickly, in my opinion. They should have developed him, but Jacksonville had made so many mistakes this year in terms of coaching, player personnel. Their ownership and their head coach makes the excuse a lot, like, "Oh, it's our first year." When it was our first year, we won the championship. So, if you really look past, kind of go out of your comfort zone and try to find players that really match the indoor game, like you can really find stars. And Jacksonville has way too many resources to be 2-9, in my opinion.
Well, Jacksonville must have agreed with you on Harrison Poole because they brought him back this past week. So definitely love to see that. And then one other move that we will talk about here shortly is a rather large one, but they also brought back Jaron Wilson, signed DJ Matthews, a wide receiver, Kevin Didio Weber. They also lost like 3 different players to IR, as mentioned before. So kind of an interesting little flood of players there, but Jacksonville's kind of been cycling things all season long to try and find the right combination of pieces, which is definitely much different than the NAL. But another transaction I wanted to talk about was a rather large one. Duke City has a new head coach going forward for the rest of the season. Fred Griggs, former general manager and head coach, is now actually with the Massachusetts Pirates. Very interesting to see that unfold. Cody, what were your initial thoughts when you saw Fred Griggs is no longer with Duke City?
There's just something about Duke City. We talked about it. I was actually on the show about a month or so ago. I can't remember. Coach Trey was on, and he was talking about how the power struggle between Bramante and Griggs was just kind of putting a splinter into that locker room. Now, again, I have no inside knowledge. I don't claim to be an insider. I just go based off what people say. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. But clearly something wasn't working with Griggs to the point where they had to either let him go or it was a mutual parting of ways. Had to bring in a new coach. Again, it's kind of like a Jacksonville situation. Your season's done. You're not making the playoffs. The best you can do is play spoiler. You've brought in some guys. Hassan Rogers looks like a good lightning bolt. And there's just something about Duke City to me where it's just they not only do they cycle players, they cycle the coaches. To me, I call it the spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, and they're just trying to find something right now that sticks. Will it? I'm not sure, but again, kind of like Jacksonville, maybe this is building momentum to 2025, or maybe they have a new head coach heading into February, March of next year.
Yeah, absolutely could be the scenario where, Kerry Loughlin comes in and nothing looks much better. And, obviously it would be difficult to make a dramatic change with only, I think, 4 games left. But at that point, I could definitely see them making another change. It wouldn't shock me at the slightest. But, you bring in Loughlin, you bring in a guy like Chris Hemphill, who's been in the IFL before with Bismarck as a defensive coordinator. He was with Louisiana to start the season. Before they folded. He definitely brought in some Duke City guys over there with himself in Louisiana. So kind of interesting to see him with Duke City now. And then also the different additions on that coaching staff were very interesting to me, but kind of a large staff as well. So I think that's a selling point going forward when you're talking about, recruiting players and trying to get them there. But speaking of players, Speedy Gonzalez is back. He was traded to Tucson like last week or 2 weeks ago, and now he's back in Duke City. Krish, you're shaking your head. What are your thoughts on this move?
Man, when Speedy got traded, I was happy for him. I know Speedy well. He could be closer to family in Arizona, but it's kind of crazy to me, right, to trade a player to a team and then trade him back. That shows that you did a lack of due diligence on that player on Tucson's part, in my opinion. I think if you really wanted him, you should have, sat down and said, okay, because Speedy not a depth piece. Speedy's a top rated receiver on any team in the IFL, in my opinion. So at Tucson, I don't think used him correctly. I don't think Speedy had one catch last game with Tucson, if I'm not mistaken. I think he didn't even pop him on the stat sheet, but he played. So that was funny to me to see. But I think Duke City's trying to build something. I think they have something with Tomoy and Terry. He scored 7 touchdowns in 3 games. Like, Cody said about Hassan Rogers. I mean, the sauce, he's going crazy right now. I think in 4 indoor football league games, he has, I want to say, 12 touchdowns. He hasn't turned over the ball 1 time. So, I mean, he's a stud in the making for sure. I think you just build with those pieces and you build on top of those. Next season, I think you could have something real special. So,
Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but Rogers was with the NAL prior to this, right? Or was it the AIF?
yeah, Rogers was with the Oklahoma Flying Aces. He tried out for Frisco and didn't make it, but he started at DB, and then he moved to wide receiver, and then he moved to running back, and now he's at quarterback. And now him with offensive coordinator Martino Theus. Martino Theus is a guy, he's former Duke City head coach. His offense was putting up over like 55 points a game when he was the offensive coordinator at Duke City, or head coach at Duke City. So I think his offense and Hassan Rogers are going to put something good together.
Definitely. Rogers, obviously, as you just mentioned, played multiple positions, so he's definitely got some room for growth in the quarterback position and already doing some great things. So he's definitely an exciting player to watch. And Duke City obviously seems to be turning over the reins to him because they released Joseph Manusco, which I thought was interesting as well. So lots to unpack over the past week here. There's been a lot of big moves, and it kind of affects the playoff picture in multiple facets because Tucson's still there, kind of trying to be scrappy, work their way into one of the 6 seeds. And then you've got some other teams there still fighting. San Antonio is bringing in guys left and right. They're trying to make their way into the playoffs. Massachusetts still signing guys. Chris, I know there's one move in particular you've been talking about a lot, so I'll let you get to it real quick on Mass. The kicker situation. You've been very, very critical of the kicker that Massachusetts had. They finally replaced him. What are your thoughts on the new kicker there?
I support all my guys, right? And it's hard to see when we cut Josh. I was obviously a little upset, but I understood, Josh was a veteran. It was time for a change. Football's a business at the end of the day, and I get that. So we brought in Cam Sutherland, and we thought he was going to be good. And unfortunately, he turned out not to be good. I think Cam's a great kid. I think he has a bright future overseas or somewhere else, just not here. It takes a lot to play here. Our new kicker, we have Henry Neal. He has a ton of experience, so I'm really excited that we have someone with experience. Our kicking game cost us the last 4 games, right? So we needed a change. We needed a change in game 2. I don't know why we didn't make a change in game 2, but now we made a change so we can, kind of get back on the right path.
All right, well, one more thing that I wanted to point out, and I'll send this one to Cody. Cody, I know there was talk at first that the AFL players would be suspended if they left, and correct me if I'm wrong, Zach Reeder at one point last season, I feel like he finished the season with an IFL team. Did he not sign an IFL contract prior to 2024? Do you know?
No, he didn't.
Oh, okay. Okay, that explains a lot.
Yeah, I don't think he did because Zach Reeder was with Iowa for a little bit because it was between him and Daniel Smith before I think they shipped Daniel Smith off to Tulsa, if I'm not mistaken. My memory's a little hazy, but yeah, I think Reeder was with Iowa for a little bit and then he either went somewhere else or he finished the season with them. I don't know if he signed an AFL contract or not. But I will say this to your credit, the one that gets me is Brian Smith. He is the wide receiver for Tucson. I think he played a game or 2 for Louisiana Voodoo, and then he came back. He was a former Jacksonville Sharks wide receiver. So I don't know if they just kind of did away with that for this season or not. But yeah, he's back in the indoor football league, but I can't remember if he actually played a game for Louisiana in the AFL. So like I said, if that's the case, he's like my example A of like, hey, are you honoring these contracts or not? I'm not sure, but yeah.
I think he got released from Jacksonville. I think they did him a solid and released him so he could go to Tucson.
Gotcha. So that's probably the loophole here is if you were released, you can come back because that would explain a lot. Joe Manusco was, in Philadelphia when they folded, and he had been released from Vegas prior to going to Philadelphia and then was able to sign with Duke City. So that explains a lot. Maybe that's the whole difference here. But I would be interested to see if they continue to leave those players suspended because a lot of teams are starting to fold. Sorry about that. But as the playoff picture starts to shape up, Cody, is there any team that's very surprising to you?
A team that's very surprising to me right now. Do you want a team that's outside of the playoff picture or inside the playoff picture?
Let's go with the playoff picture team and then one that's surprising to you that they're outside the playoffs.
As of right now, I would say a team that is inside the playoff picture that has been a surprise is obviously going to be like Vegas. Didn't know what to expect from them going into the season. And I'd even throw Massachusetts in there as well. But on the other side, they're 500 right now. They're clinging to that 3 seed with anything that can happen. And you're just kind of looking at what does Massachusetts have in store for the last few weeks of the season? Is this going to be a collapse, or is this going to be something where they hang on to that 3 or 4 seed and make their way in? I think Vegas is solid in theirs, but like I said, it's on the opposite end of the spectrum. I think that they are very good. They came out 7-0. They have been not as good as of late, but at the same time, I do think that they are fighting for their playoff lives with Northern Arizona and Arizona breathing down their neck. And you can't forget San Diego or San Antonio. A team that is outside of the playoff picture, I know some people thought Tulsa would be maybe a fringe playoff team, and I'm going to throw them in there as a surprise because they play Iowa this week. They have a chance to win this game, and then Green Bay and Quad City here. Quad City loses this game this weekend. Tulsa wins. That's moving Tulsa even further up, and they just got done losing 6 in a row before their last win. So there's just something about Tulsa that their schedule is kind of shaping up to the point where if they can string together some wins, the Oilers could sneak into that 4 seed if Quad City or Massachusetts just has a complete collapse. So that's what I have. That's my surprise right now. Excuse me. That's my surprise. I don't think Tulsa necessarily gets in, but there's just something about that where if the chips fall the right way, the Oilers could see themselves in the playoffs some way, somehow.
Man, that would be a huge boon for the Tulsa fans. And I was just informed yesterday, and I was not aware of this, that Tulsa's coaching staff is basically whittled down to more or less Marvin Jones, and that's about it. He's been calling both sides of the ball, which I was not aware of prior to yesterday, which is very interesting. Kudos to coach for being able to still manage some wins here as of late. And this Eastern Division is shaping up to be very interesting on the back half of that playoff picture. When at first it looked like 3-4 teams are running away with it and nobody else had a chance. So I like to see the parity here at the end. Krish, what is going on in Massachusetts?
So, I feel like I'll start with a couple things, right? Our locker room culture, I think, is great. I think we have the guys, we have the mentality, we have guys who are leaders. Matt Elam is, one of the best leaders I've seen in 6 years here, but it's hard because we have a lack of execution, right? A lack of discipline when it comes to the end of games where, last week, Tom Manos got outcoached. That's it. That's how it was, and he knows that too. But we gave the game away. 2 minutes and 37 seconds left, and it's 44-44, and they have one timeout, and we're in the first down on the 20-yard line. Obviously, they're going to let us score, so we need to drain the clock down and take it to the 1 minute warning. But it's like little things. When we played Green Bay, it was a 3rd and 17, and they had the ball at the 4-yard line. And I remember standing on the sideline, and I said to one of our guys, I'm like, we're not going to get this. And they converted. And he's like, yeah, I know, because this is what we do. we choke at the end. And it's like we can't keep choking these games away because we need to lock in and finish. Once we finish, I'm confident there's no team in this conference that can beat us. Green Bay not better than us. Frisco not better than us. Green Bay, we had Green Bay beat. We had Frisco beat. So I I feel like this is week you're gonna see a lot of changes. We made a lot of personnel changes. We have our original receiving core back. We activated Carrington off short-term IR. He's a huge piece. You know, I think we're gonna put it all together this week, and I think we're gonna go on a run. The Quad Cities doesn't stand a chance. I hope Quad City loses to Green Bay today too, so we can just finish them off next week.
That would definitely be big for Massachusetts' playoff hopes. Overall, if they want to kind of clinch that 3 seed there, they basically don't really have a chance unless Frisco just collapses to make the 2 seed anymore. But they could definitely solidify that 3 seed if Quad City were to lose this upcoming weekend. Definitely interesting to see how everything's shaken out. Interesting to see the change at with Duke City as well. And then, man, can we talk about this Western Division for a second? Like, holy cow, is this team or this division or conference division, whatever, just incredibly good. At the top, you got Bay Area 9-2, Vegas 8-3, Arizona 8-4, Northern Arizona 7-4, San Diego 7-5, San Antonio's now winning record 6-5, and then obviously Tucson and Duke City are kind of falling back there at the end. But when you face all of these teams above you, it becomes incredibly difficult to win in the West. So, Cody, talk to me a little bit about the West and how it shaped up this year. Did you see this coming?
I mean, I saw it coming. I didn't expect the teams that we had seen. Like I said, Vegas is right there. When I did my preseason previews earlier this year, I thought San Diego could fight for a playoff spot. I thought San Antonio could fight for a playoff spot. But then I kind of flip-flopped Vegas and Tucson because I thought bringing in Billy back and what they had to start the season with, I thought Tucson would actually be more of a player in the race. Excuse me. As for the West, I like I said in the preseason, it was going to be a fight. Every game was going to be a fight. When you play the Western Conference teams, you look at the coaches that they have there, whether it's Rob Keefe, Mike Davis, Kevin Guy, Wes Moss. I mean, even Tom Manos, even the rookie coaches like Jenniser or Fred Griggs at the time. And you can't forget Billy Back. The coaching is just not superior. It's more veteran than what you would see in the East. Not to say that the East is bad or anything like that, but you know that it is a gauntlet in the West. When you're playing these teams 2 or 3 times, you have the Arizona, 3-team rivalries, the Roy Troy Bowl, the Kevin Guy Bowl, whatever. It was just, I knew it was going to line up to this. I obviously didn't have the teams correct, so shame on me. But yeah, it's shaping up for Arizona to really make a push towards the 1 seed, especially if Bay Area drops in the other games. Northern Arizona has an opportunity to increase their stock if Vegas keeps losing the way that they have. But it's shaping up really well. I mean, if San Diego can win, I forget who they're playing this weekend. It's just drawing a blank on me right now. Anyway, the one that I'm looking forward to is Northern Arizona and San Antonio because they play tomorrow. That one is going to really shape up that 4th seed. And then depending on who San Diego plays, yeah, you got it pulled up right there. Yeah, they play Tucson, so it should. I'm not saying that's an auto win for San Diego, but if they do win that game at Tucson, and then you have the winner of Northern Arizona, San Antonio, I think Northern Arizona wins that. San Antonio might be on the outside looking in just on how tough that Western Conference is. So it's going to shape up to be a very, very fun fight for the finish. And obviously, you can't forget that Arizona Vegas one for the 2nd seed in the West as well. So it's going to be a fun last 5 weeks of the season.
Absolutely, and we're talking playoff pictures, so let's go ahead and talk about a couple of these games. I mean, you see right here, San Antonio versus Northern Arizona. That's a big one for playoff seeding. Arizona at Vegas, that's a big one. I want to say Bay Area, but that's not true. Massachusetts, big. If they don't win this game, that could be huge for their playoff hopes. So there's definitely some interesting games this upcoming week. Excuse me, my child's going on. That's in the background. Cameron McPherson says the IFL is unique as a national league in that it's kind of a Western league. The Western Conference has density that makes its travel a little bit easier than the East. That is 100% accurate. Cameron's pretty good at pointing out that stuff. Sorry about that. So any quick thoughts, any games of the week here that you really want to discuss, Cody?
I mean, is it cliche to say they're all games of the week? No, I mean, honestly, you started out with Massachusetts and Jacksonville. If Massachusetts loses this game and Jacksonville gets revenge for what was it, like 26-23, whatever it was earlier in the season, Massachusetts is now in a fight with the other teams, Tulsa and Iowa. You're dealing with whoever wins that game is moving closer to Quad City. Quad City loses to Green Bay, which most people expect they're 11-point favorites. Quad City is now down in that lower tier with Tulsa and Iowa. You move into the western part, and it's Arizona Vegas. We're looking at who's going to be the 2 seed, who's dropping to the 3 seed. Like I said earlier, the San Diego and Tucson game, if San Diego wins that game, or God forbid they lose it, that hurts their playoff chances when you have 4 teams that are already above you and you're on the outside looking in. And then Sunday's game, San Antonio and Northern Arizona, a lot of people thinking, myself included, Sam Castronova, MVP candidate, Josh Jones, Rookie of the Year candidate, MVP dark horse candidate, or just straight up candidate. You're going to have a quarterback battle that Sunday where you're looking at it going, hey, one team is already in the playoff spot, another team looking for it. What are we going to do? So I think it really shapes itself up this week for the next 4 weeks of the season of who's going to make that playoff push. This week's going to make or break some seasons for some teams, and other teams are going to be looking for 2025. So.
Absolutely. I mean, we're hitting that point in the season where we definitely have a good idea who's going to make the playoffs or who's at least in the hunt. And then some teams that are, like you said, already looking to 2025, Tucson, Duke City, a couple other teams in here that are trying to finish up strong and get some momentum to head into next season and hopefully figure out if their coach that they have right now is the coach of the future for that team. Cody, thank you so much for joining us today. Any final thoughts for fans before we get out of here? And then, as always, if you're watching, I know I haven't said it. I know I pulled up a comment, but make sure you go subscribe to In the Alley on YouTube. Great channel. I'm not just saying that because Cody's on the show. I legitimately watch his content. I thoroughly enjoy it. I recommend you should check it out as well. So again, that's In the Alley on YouTube. Cody, go ahead with your final thoughts, buddy.
Excuse me. I apologize. Sore throat. Yeah, anything that's already been said. I'm just looking forward to this week. I won't be watching every single game on YouTube because I'm actually going to be at a game for the first time in a long time. So I'll have to play catch up. And I'm actually just looking forward to seeing some live indoor football action. I'm excited to see Green Bay in the flesh, see how good they truly, truly are. Obviously, they're the only team to point the playoff spot. So I'm curious to see who starts for Quad City. It's been Judd Erickson last week. Do they go back to Mike Irwin? I'm not sure, but I'm really, really excited to see do they try and upset Green Bay? How does that go? And then, yeah, I'm excited to see what the scores are going to be when we get out of that game and see how the playoff picture really shapes out. But I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the time. Yeah, plug the channel. Go watch In the Alley. Should have a Week 15 preview out here at some point in time throughout the day. But other than that, yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thank you. I'm going to go spend time with my family since I'm up here. And yeah, go Steam Wheelers.
Definitely appreciate your time as well, man. I know it's very early, but I appreciate you stopping by and chatting. And I look forward to working with you more in the future. Like I said, I've got a lot of respect for what you do on your channel, and we definitely need some solid content creators in the indoor football world that are out there, giving it good coverage and helping it grow because we're definitely hitting a point in time where it seems like there's a large desire for alternative football leagues. It's just a matter of getting them out there in front of fans and letting them know that they're there, because obviously IFL is kind of still growing very much so. But thank you so much for your time, Cody. We appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your family time.
Appreciate it, guys. See you.
Have a good one. So, Chris, we kind of breezed over it real quick. I want to circle back to the NAL championship game real quick. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, and we'll definitely do a more in-depth breakdown next week's episode. But what are your overall thoughts on the championship game that ended up being decided by just 1 point between Sioux City and Omaha?
That was a great tone setter for the league. That's what the league wanted. That's the championship they wanted, and they got it. 34-14, Sioux City stormed back. They tied the game. It ended on a fake 2-point conversion. I think I think it's so good for the league and the direction they want to move in to have a championship like that, because you need to understand, when you have a championship game, you have a lot of first time fans watching, right? And so that can be a game to hook fans on your product, and I think that game did it for sure.
No, I completely agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. And shout out to the Mark Cast and Mike Mitchell. They were just talking about this the other day with the UFL championship game, which was very much not this exciting. It was very one-sided, and they were talking about how that probably affected the viewership numbers. It peaked out at about, I think, 1.6 million viewers. I know we're not talking UFL, but it peaked out at 1.6 million viewers, and big part of the reason why it did is because Tom Brady was on the broadcast. Maybe that broadcast hits 2 million if the game's a little bit better. You never know. But that's another story for another day. But the same thought can be had in this particular situation with the NAL. They're trying to grow, they're trying to rebuild their image, and if you wanted a game to point to and be like, this is what the NAL is, this was your game right here. And you hit the nail on the head. 47-46. Going into the fourth quarter, Omaha held a 13-point lead, and ultimately Sioux City scored 12 unanswered points there in the fourth quarter and stormed back and almost won the game at the end. Tommy Armstrong does what Tommy Armstrong does and puts up 7 touchdowns, only had 3 incomplete passes on the entire day. Just unbelievable performance by him. Verlon Reed played really well as well, threw 5 touchdown passes. You saw the rushing game there with Fred Bruno score another touchdown. Just a really, really good game for the league to, like I said, kind of point to and be like, this is what the NAL is. It is. If you want exciting, fast-paced football where it's going to be down to the wire, come watch this game, and then ultimately you'll understand what we're all about. I think that was really good for the league to kind of move forward with. You needed a game to, like you said, hook those new viewers, bring them in, and keep them in. And if the NAL can come out firing in 2025 with a more sound foundation than they did this season, and it started yesterday by announcing the Wheeling Miners. I think there's ultimately a scenario where the NAL could completely rebuild their image and move forward into a better future. I'm not completely sold yet, and I am encouraged, but ultimately there's a lot of work left to be done. I know we talked a little bit about the franchises, but Cameron brought this up, and this is a good point to be made, and one I wanted to get your thoughts on. I know we passed by the AFL NAL talk, but unless the AFL is going to commit to a demonstrably different product than the NAL or IFL, there's no reason for them to exist, and they may as well split up. So, as we all know, the AFL launched originally with Ironman football, and they also launched with limited substitutions and a couple other different rules that have since changed. And now they have gone to free substitutions, which has stopped the need for Ironman football. And now they're more of an indoor rules with an arena twist in the fact that they're using, more passing game than rushing game. With that in mind, Krish, do you see a need for the AFL to exist or coexist with all these other leagues when at the end of the day, their product on the field isn't all that different than these other leagues.
So, that's a really good point that Cameron made. I honestly, no. Like, if you're not going to play by IMA rules, if you're not going to play by, you have rebound nets there, right? How are you different from the NAL? That's what the NAL is doing, and that's what the IFL is talking about doing. The IFL this offseason is going to vote on if they're going to have nets or not next year. So, we might have 3 leagues doing the exact same thing. So I think we have to look at if they go to Ironman rules, absolutely. I think the promise of arena football still exists. I think it's stronger than ever. There are fans that love the AFL style. And there are fans that will eat the AFL style up. You see the Firebirds, you see how many fans they drew last game. They sold that place out. So there's interest. I think arena football needs to exist somehow.
I completely agree, and I don't think that it can only exist with the AAL too. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the AAL too, but how can the AAL 2, a developmental league for arena football, exist if there's no league playing arena rules football? And yes, I know that the AFL has, a fullback, and that's definitely one form of arena football, but at the same time, there's still a lot to be said about the Ironman style of play. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a situation where everybody plays Iron Man. Maybe it's just your wide receivers, defensive backs, and running backs, and you let your offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and quarterback, not play both ways, and then obviously your kicker. Maybe that's something that you do, but ultimately there's got to be something here that changes, because realistically, I don't think there's a scenario where this makes much sense, And if that's the case, and if your rules aren't any different than all these other leagues, what's stopping a merge? Like, really, at the end of the day, what's stopping all 3 of these leagues coming together? And when I say all 3 of these leagues, I mean the AIF, the AFL, and the NAL. I am not talking about the IFL. The IFL stands on its own, because at this point they've got 16 teams. They don't gain anything by taking all their competition on board, that realistically. Whereas these other leagues that are smaller, they're trying to build, they're trying to gain teams, they're trying to gain a national footprint. If they come together and they work together, they all of a sudden gain all of those things overnight. So it's definitely a situation where I think that there's there's something to be said about a potential merger there. I mean, would you be in favor of watching all 3 of these leagues come together and ultimately, give us what we all want, a quote unquote super league?
Yes, absolutely, but they need to come with a recognizable name. If the AFL and NAL were to merge, they would need to come back under the AFL name or the NAL name. The AIF name is not that strong. When you think of the NAL, you think of National Arena League, right? People know the NAL, people know the AFL more, obviously, but it's all about brand recognition. And that's what the AFL has now. That's why the AFL is still around. That's why they kept it alive, despite everything, all the chaos. It's because they know the brand recognition is so strong. Same thing with the NAL. So, yes, if you're going to play by the same rules, then yeah, you should all come together, no doubt.
Absolutely, and I'm trying to pull it up, but it's not cooperating at the moment. But somebody on Twitter the other day shared the GIF, or the meme of The Office, where 3 of the guys are standing there with finger guns pointed at each other, waiting for the other to flinch. And essentially, that's what this is right now. The AFL, the NAL, and the AIF are essentially all the same style rule set for the most part, maybe a little bit of tweaks here and there. And ultimately, they're all competing for essentially the same fan base. This is the meme I'm talking about, or the GIF. Essentially, these leagues are in a Mexican standoff, and they're just waiting for one to blink to see who folds and who eliminates some of their competition for them. But at this point, I think it's a situation where if they all came together, all of a sudden you have a really strong 16 to 18 team league. And that could be very intriguing for arena football fans, and maybe you draw people in who haven't been fans of the NAL, the AIF, or the AFL traditionally. Guys like, and I'm not to call him out, but Cody. Cody's more of an IFL fan. He doesn't really watch the other leagues. But all of a sudden, if there's another 16 to 18 team league, people like that might be tuning in. All of a sudden, maybe you catch some UFL fans because they're like, hey, okay. All of a sudden, there's another large indoor league that can feed the UFL players, or maybe even the NFL players. We've talked about it at length that the teams like the Atlanta Falcons are starting to watch some of the IFL players filter up, or the Seattle Seahawks that just signed Ricky Persson Jr. from the UFL as well. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, no, I think we discussed a lot, but I think it's just these leagues need to one day put their egos aside and need to realize, like, if they want to get that national TV deal, they all have to come together. There has to be some sort of compromise, because otherwise it's going to be the same thing year after year where you see these teams folding. The IFL has 16 owners from 16 different parts of the country. And I can tell you a lot of those owners are very different. Like Gina is different than Roy Choi, right? They're different, but they all work together because they all want to see the league succeed, right? Under one leadership. The NAL has to do the same thing. And if the AIF merges with the NAL, they all have to do the same thing. There's a lot of personalities in the AIF. There's a lot. And there's a lot of personalities in the NAL. They need to realize, like, if there's clashes, if there's behind-the-scenes issues, things are not going to work out. Things are not going to go smoothly. When you have Corpus Christi this year, when they took a 12-hour bus ride to Mississippi and then had to turn back 12 hours because, you don't want to run into situations like that. So I, caution all the new franchises, the Beaumont Renegades, right? Beaumont is a first-year franchise. If they join the NAL, they need to make sure they have everything so they don't leave anyone in the dust, right? They're first-year owners. So first-year owners are going to have issues, but they need to be ready, for the fire, and they need to learn from other first-year owners. So it needs to be more of a collaboration effort, and I think the NAL is trying to get there. And once they can, like Coach Rez in Wheeling, he should be going out there and sharing ideas with other owners, because clearly what he's doing in Wheeling is working. The broadcast looks great. The attendance is decent for the most part. And, they have a drum line. They have a great cheerleading squad. Like, they have everything. So he should be, helping other owners or other coaches, other GMs. It should just be, if everyone works together, I think it can be really great for the NAL and all the leagues.
I agree, and that's my firm thought. I understand that there's more reasons other than ego why you don't get involved with other leagues and stuff like that. It's not just a matter of ego and a matter of, personal inviting or anything like that. There's other reasons behind that. I don't claim to understand all the business side. What I do understand is the football side, and I do understand that if these three leagues come together, there's a very realistic situation where all of a sudden you streamline indoor football as a whole, and you make it a lot easier for casual fans to want to get involved, because it's not 4 leagues splitting your attention, and it's not as confusing. It's very, very streamlined. It's cut and dry. There's the NAL or the AFL and the IFL, and that's it. And you have, say, 32 teams, 16 in each team. Maybe eventually we even get to a point where you can somehow play the IFL championship and the IFL champion, the AFL champion, or NAL champion. And I think we're a long way off from any of that happening. But I would just say that I feel like the whole industry is stronger together than apart. And maybe it's a situation where some of these teams need to not necessarily exist, but they need to collaborate. Maybe we see 2 ownership groups come together and bring, their resources all together to have one profitable team and one really solid foundation for a league. But that's that's a story for another day. Before we get out of here, one more quick word from a couple sponsors and a partner.
This is a Huddle Sports Network broadcast. You can find us on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Facebook, and of course YouTube. Get all your NFL news here first.
All right, with this show, as well as a couple other shows, can be caught on the Huddle Sports Network now. They are a Roku channel, as well as YouTube, Facebook, all over the place. So go give them a follow and shout them out. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to go out on your Roku channel. It's been something that I've been looking forward to for a long time, and now we have it. But we're going to go ahead and untie a nice shiny bow on this one. I definitely think this was a great episode, a lot of fun stuff to discuss. The NIL, I think, is finally, they have a pretty solid foundation to move into 2025. There's still some questions about some of the teams that are involved right now, but I think that we've got a definite direction we're headed, and that's a good thing to say after what has gone on the last couple of years in the NIL. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. We've had 24, 25 viewers this entire time, pretty steady. I know that Coach Rez didn't come on. I know Coach Tatum didn't come on. Unfortunately, things came up. They were not able to join us this week. We will try and get them on in the future. Obviously, a lot to talk about with that Wheeling situation, and then obviously wanted to rehash the championship game with Coach Tatum. I know Coach is on vacation, out in his cabin in Kentucky, I believe it was. So definitely want to make sure he's enjoying himself. And then Coach Rez from Wheeling had a local radio appearance to make. So, we may be in the media spectrum, but we're not quite as important as local radio quite yet. But we'll get there. But we'll leave you with this one. And, maybe you can help us grow our audience a little bit while we're at it.